Mass psychosis is real. Here's how to escape the madness. There comes a moment in your life when you look around and realize something is deeply wrong, not just with the world, but with the way everyone seems to be thinking, speaking, and reacting at the same time. It's that eerie sense that reality itself is bending, not because of a natural disaster or war, but because mass perception has shifted into something irrational, something surreal. You see people repeating slogans they don't understand, defending ideologies they haven't questioned, attacking others with a kind of robotic fervor. And the scariest part, they think they're awake. They think you're the crazy one. That's when it hits you. This isn't just confusion. This is mass psychosis. And Carl Jung, centuries ago, warned us about this exact moment. Mass psychosis doesn't begin with violence, it begins with fear. Subtle fear. The kind that creeps into your bones through repetition, through media, through passive silence. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you that safety is found in conformity. That truth is what the crowd agrees on, and that questioning, true philosophical questioning, is dangerous. And so, slowly, we stop thinking. Not because we're stupid, but because thinking becomes painful. It becomes socially expensive. You don't want to be the outcast, the heretic, the problem. So you nod. You agree. You share the post. You share the post. You censor yourself. And inch by inch, your individuality dies not in dramatic collapse, but in small, daily betrayals of your own mind.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
What's terrifying is that most people never notice it happening. They think they're making free choices. But in reality, they're following scripts written by others. Philosophers like Jung, Nietzsche, and even Dostoevsky saw this pattern as one of the greatest threats to humanity, not just politically, but spiritually. When the individual dissolves into the collective, when personal conscience is replaced by groupthink, then evil can rise without resistance. Because now it doesn't look like evil, it looks like consensus. You've seen this before, in history books, in revolutions, in cults, in cancel mobs, in families, in schools. Mass psychosis doesn't look like madness to the people inside it. It looks like virtue. That's the trap. That's why it spreads. And if you don't pause, if you don't develop the will to see, you will become part of it. Not because you're broken, but because you're human. Because the desire to belong is ancient. Because the fear of exile is primal. Because the ego would rather be accepted than be right. Let's go deeper. Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow and every single person around you says that up is down. That water is dry. That kindness is hate. Would you trust your senses? Or would you start to second-guess your reality? Would you fight to hold on to your sanity? Or would you surrender just to stop feeling so alone? This isn't hypothetical, it's the psychological experiment we're all living in right now. And the only way out is through radical inner clarity. Jung taught that the first step to escaping mass psychosis is to reclaim your own mind. Not in theory, not for show, but in the quiet, painful solitude of honest introspection. You must ask, what do I actually believe? Why do I believe it? What part of me is afraid to question? This isn't easy. It requires courage most people never develop, not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught that their mind is sacred, that their perceptions matter, that their awareness is the last line of defense against societal collapse. And here's where it gets even more intense. Mass psychosis thrives in distraction, in noise, in speed, in constant digital stimulation. If you want to see clearly, you must learn to be still, to sit with discomfort, to notice the subtle manipulations in headlines, in conversations, in your own reactions. You must become a philosopher, not an academic, but a seer, someone who dares to ask what others avoid. Someone who would rather be alone with truth than popular with illusions. But here's the catch. The moment you start to wake up, the world will push back. Hard. You will be called names. You will be misunderstood. People will say you've changed. And they'll be right, you have. Because seeing through the madness means you can't unsee it. You can't return to the comfort of collective delusion. You begin to feel everything differently. You notice when people speak in scripts. You notice emotional manipulation disguised as morality. You feel the weight of silence in rooms where everyone is pretending. And it hurts. It really does. But it's also the beginning of your liberation. Let me ask you, when was the last time you had an opinion that scared you? That made you pause before speaking, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. That's the edge. That's the threshold between sleep and awakening. Mass psychosis dies in the mind of the individual who refuses to lie to others, yes, but more importantly, to themselves. So, if mass psychosis is real, and it is, then the way out isn't to fix the crowd. It's to fix the self, to become so grounded, so clear, so internally aligned that no amount of noise can shake your foundation. That's not idealism. That's survival. Because in an age of madness, sanity is rebellion. And rebellion, real rebellion, doesn't start with riots. It starts in the mirror. The prison of consensus, how groupthink destroys the soul. We often think of prisons as physical spaces, walls, bars, guards. But the most powerful prisons are invisible. They have no walls, no locks. They exist in our minds, held together by one thing: the need to belong. This is the prison of consensus. It's built from the silent agreement that we will not question what everyone else pretends to understand, that we will nod even when we feel dissonance, that we will smile even when our souls scream. It is the prison where truth becomes dangerous and agreement becomes survival. And what we rarely admit is this: most people would rather stay imprisoned than risk being free. Groupthink is seductive. It gives you certainty without effort, identity without introspection, and friends without vulnerability. It makes you feel safe because everyone around you echoes the same thoughts, the same outrage, the same sanitized vocabulary. But what if that safety is the very thing killing your authenticity? What if consensus isn't a sign of truth, but of submission? Philosophers have warned about this for centuries. Nietzsche called it the herd instinct. Kierkegaard called it the crowd. Jung called it the unconscious collective. They all pointed to the same danger. When the individual dissolves into the group, the soul begins to rot. Here's the irony. We think of ourselves as free thinkers. We post quotes about authenticity. We talk about mental health. We celebrate uniqueness. How often do we actually live it? How often do we say what we truly feel when we know it might cost us approval? How often do we challenge the prevailing narrative, even gently, when we sense it's incomplete or wrong? The truth is, for most of us, consensus is a drug. It gives us short-term comfort and long-term decay. And like any drug, it makes us dependent. We begin to fear silence. We fear difference. We fear ourselves. The soul cannot thrive in a culture of consensus. It needs friction. It needs the sacred tension of doubt, reflection, and self-inquiry. It needs to be able to say, "I don't know," without shame. It needs to be able to say, "I disagree," without fear. But when groupthink takes over, these statements become dangerous. And so people shrink. They edit their thoughts before they even speak. They trade curiosity for certainty. And eventually they forget what it feels like to be real. Let's go deeper. Why is groupthink so powerful? Because it plays on our deepest fear: isolation. We are social creatures. We're wired to belong. But when consensus becomes a requirement for belonging, we're faced with a brutal choice: lie and be loved, or tell the truth and risk being alone. This is the edge of the human condition. And this is where the soul either awakens or dies. Because every time you silence your truth to stay inside the group, a piece of your soul turns to ash. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. So I'll ask you this: how much of your personality is truly yours? How many of your beliefs, your values, your opinions, how many were chosen consciously? And how many were inherited, absorbed, or copied just to fit in? This is not an accusation. This is a call to consciousness. Because if we don't ask these questions, we'll spend our lives inside the prison of consensus, mistaking comfort for meaning. And here's the most tragic part: groupthink doesn't just suppress individual thought, it destroys collective wisdom. When everyone is too afraid to speak the truth, the group becomes stupid. It loses nuance, flexibility, depth. It becomes a machine running on pre-approved scripts, incapable of real change. And eventually, it collapses because no lie can sustain itself forever. But by then, the damage is already done. The thinkers have been silenced. The artists have been muted. The healers have been exiled, and the soul of the culture begins to rot from the inside out. So how do we escape this prison? Not by attacking the group, but by reclaiming the self, by choosing to think, to question, to stand alone when necessary, by honoring the tension between belonging and truth, not by rejecting community, but by demanding that our communities allow space for individuality, by practicing the kind of courage that doesn't look like shouting, but like choosing silence when the room is screaming lies. Because real courage is quiet. It's internal. It's the moment you feel pressure to conform and you choose instead to pause, to ask, to feel, to think. That's where the soul lives, in the space between reaction and reflection. And that's where freedom begins. The age of noise silence is the new revolution. We are drowning in noise. Every second, another opinion, another headline, another notification. The world doesn't whisper anymore, it shouts. It demands our attention, our outrage, our allegiance. And in this relentless barrage of sound, we've lost something ancient, something sacred. Silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness. The kind of silence that invites truth to surface. The kind of silence that allows the soul to speak. In an age where volume is mistaken for value, silence has become a radical act, a philosophical rebellion, a revolution. Think about it. When was the last time you sat in complete silence, not just without sound, but without reaching for your phone, your playlist, your podcast, your opinions? When was the last time you allowed your mind to wander without steering it toward productivity or distraction? Most people can't do it, not because they're weak, but because silence reveals the very thing we've been trying to avoid, ourselves. And in a culture built on external validation, the self-raw, unfiltered, unperforming is terrifying. But here's the truth. Without silence, there is no self. There is only echo. There is only reaction. There is only mimicry. Silence is not emptiness. It is the fertile soil of awareness. It is the space where thoughts become original, where emotions become intelligible, where insight is born. All the greatest thinkers in history, Socrates, Buddha, Jesus, Marcus Aurelius, Jung, they all knew this. They all sought solitude not as escape, but as initiation. Because you cannot know what you believe, what you fear, what you love until the noise stops. And yet, we avoid it. We fill every gap with stimulation. We fear boredom like death. But boredom is not the enemy, it is the doorway. It is the threshold between the surface mind and the deeper self. When you sit in silence long enough, the clutter begins to clear. The voices of the crowd fade. And something else rises. A knowing, a center, a presence that cannot be manipulated by trends or headlines. That is the self. And the self cannot be programmed. It cannot be radicalized. It cannot be hijacked by mass psychosis. This is why silence is so dangerous to systems of control. It breaks the spell. It interrupts the hypnosis. It gives you the space to feel again, to think again, to see again. When you are constantly reacting, you are easy to predict, easy to manipulate. But when you are still, when you watch before you speak, when you observe before you act, you become a mystery. You become sovereign. And sovereignty is the one thing the machine cannot tolerate. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you let yourself be bored? Not passively, but intentionally. When was the last time you sat in a room with no agenda, no noise, no stimulation, just your breath, your thoughts, your body? If that idea makes you anxious, good. That's the resistance you've been trained to feel. And that resistance is the doorway to truth. Because here's the paradox. Silence isn't passive. It's active. It's a confrontation. When you choose to be silent in a world that's screaming, you're not withdrawing, you're rebelling. You're saying, I will not be rushed. I will not be herded. I will not be reduced to a reaction. I will think. I will feel. I will be. And from that place wisdom arises, not borrowed wisdom, not second-hand quotes, but your own clarity, your own moral compass, your own voice. And once you hear that voice, truly hear it, the noise loses its power. You no longer chase trends because you know what matters to you. You no longer fear disapproval because you've approved of yourself. You no longer need to be loud because your presence speaks louder than your words ever could. That is the power of silence. It doesn't shout, it radiates. And in a world obsessed with visibility, radiance is revolutionary. So if the madness of mass psychosis is fueled by constant noise, constant opinion, constant division, constant reaction, then the antidote is not more shouting. It's not louder politics. It's not even better arguments. It's silence. Deep, intentional, sacred silence. The kind that anchors you back into your body, your breath, your being. The kind that reveals what is real beneath what is loud. And maybe, just maybe, the most revolutionary thing you can do right now is log off, sit down and listen not to the world, but to yourself. The final escape, becoming immune to madness through inner sovereignty. There is a moment, if you've made it this far, where the question shifts from what is happening to the world to what am I going to do about it? Not in a reactive, panicked way, but in a deeply personal, grounded way. This is the turning point. Because escaping mass psychosis isn't just about seeing the madness, it's about becoming immune to it. And immunity begins with sovereignty, not political sovereignty, not social dominance, but inner sovereignty, a state of being where your thoughts are your own, your values are chosen, and your actions stem from clarity, not coercion. In a mad world, a sovereign mind is the rarest and most powerful form of resistance. But sovereignty doesn't arrive through a single insight. It's forged, slowly, painfully, through the process of reclaiming yourself from every external force that has shaped you unconsciously. It begins by asking the hardest questions. What do I believe in the absence of pressure? Who am I when no one is watching? What parts of me have I traded for approval, convenience, or safety? These questions are not comfortable, but comfort is not the goal. Freedom is. And freedom always demands sacrifice. To become sovereign, you must be willing to let go of your addiction to certainty. The crowd offers easy answers. It offers identity in exchange for obedience. But sovereignty means standing in the unknown. It means holding paradox. It means saying, I don't know, and not rushing to fill the silence. It means trusting your direct experience over someone else's narrative. This is terrifying at first because it means there's no one to blame, no ideology to hide behind. But it's also liberating, because in that space, real knowing begins. Not borrowed knowledge, but embodied truth. And here's what few people tell you. Sovereignty is lonely. Not permanently, but initially. Because when you stop living from scripts, the people who still rely on them will feel threatened. They'll call you arrogant, detached, cold, conspiratorial. You'll be misunderstood, perhaps even abandoned. But this is the cost of freedom. You must be willing to walk through the desert of aloneness to reach the oasis of authenticity. And once you arrive, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing everyone to understand you, because you understand yourself. And that self is no longer for sale. Let's be clear, becoming immune to madness doesn't mean you never feel fear or confusion. It means you don't build your life around them. It means you notice them, honor them, but don't obey them. You live from your center. You act from your principles, not your panic. You choose your words not because they're safe, but because they're true. You learn to discern the difference between your intuition and your conditioning, between your voice and the crowd's echo. And in doing so, you become unshakable, not because nothing can touch you, but because nothing can own you. Imagine a world where more people lived this way, where children were taught to question, not conform, where leaders spoke from wisdom, not performance, where communities valued conscience over compliance. That world is possible, but it doesn't begin with systems. It begins with souls, with individuals like you who choose sovereignty over sedation, who choose awareness over anesthesia, who choose to be awake even when the dream is more comfortable. So I'll leave you with this final question, the one that only you can answer. What would your life look like if you stopped outsourcing your mind? If you stopped waiting for permission to be whole, to be clear, to be alive? Because the escape from mass psychosis isn't a map, it's a decision, a vow, a commitment to yourself, repeated in every moment you choose presence over performance, truth over popularity, and peace over noise. This is the way out, not forward, not back, but inward, into the quiet strength of your own being, into the unshakable clarity that cannot be programmed, into the sovereign self, awakened and alive in a world that desperately needs your light. The madness may be real, but so is your power.